Welcome to the Gold Standard here on the 440 Sports Network. We are not live today because Braden is not here, but we are part of the Lower Broad hockey community. Again, my name is not Braden Gall. It is Emma Lingan, and I am very happy to be joined today by special guest co-host Nick Kieser, also of Lower Broad Hockey. Nick, thanks for hopping on today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Glad to be here. Just got to hang out this morning with you at Morning Skate. So, yeah, pretty seamless transition to hop on here. And yeah, glad to be here with you guys.
All right. Well, I would be remiss not to mention that we are brought to you each and every week by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Go check those guys out. But Nick, we're just going to get right into it. You already mentioned morning skate. We were there this morning ahead of tonight's game. This is Wednesday, so we have a rare Wednesday night game against the Vancouver Canucks at 8 p.m. Central. Not an ideal puck drop time here, but
I got
here
to
we
get
are.
my Starbucks beforehand.
Yeah, you'll definitely see me with at least one Diet Coke tonight, maybe more. But yeah, so let's start with morning skate then. We were there this morning, like you mentioned. Couple of quick updates. We did see Luke Evangelista. He's back skating with the team, which is a positive sign, but we did get to talk to Andrew Brunette, asked if Evangelista was going to be ready to go tonight against the Canucks. He said he's not quite there yet, but it's still, we don't have an exact timetable for him, but we do know he is progressing, which is good to see. And the fact that he's skating with the team is good to see. So hopefully see him back soon. Juuse Saros was the first goaltender off the ice this morning for the Predators. So I would imagine that means that we're going to see him start in net. Nick, any idea who we're going to see for the Canucks in net?
Yeah, should be Thatcher Demko. Unfortunately, we're not going to see Kevin Lankinen to much of what people wanted to see happen tonight. And Kiefer Sherwood is also not playing in this game and didn't even travel with the Canucks down here, fortunately. But so we'll have to wait to have Kevin Lankinen play in Nashville again as a visitor. I mean, he did it a lot when he was with the Blackhawks, right? But now that he's with the Canucks now, and I mean, I guess they want to give him some more rest. He's kind of their starter, I would say, right now. Thatcher Demko's not been what he has been known to be. So yeah, they're going with Thatcher against the Predators tonight. He was the first goalie off, and so yeah, we're gonna expect to see a matchup we didn't get to see in the playoffs in the spring with Thatcher playing. So fortunately for the Preds, their offense is clicking, so maybe they could take advantage of it, Emma.
Yeah, definitely. And, as much as we'd probably had hoped to see, like you said, Kevin Lankinen against Juuse Saros, we did get to see that matchup earlier this season in Vancouver. But, good situation for Kevin Lankinen, I think. Obviously, the Predators did try to keep him. He decided to test the market. Maybe the market was not quite what he thought it would be for his services, but still, kind of took the scenic route to get there, but he sort of has ended up in the situation he wanted to be in. Now, making less money, I'm sure, than he would like to be, but I think now this is kind of his chance to kind of show that he is a starter. He's worthy of being a starter. And so when he does become a free agent again at the end of this season, he should be up for a pretty significant payday, whether that's with the Canucks or with another team. But he's been huge for them this year at kind of keeping them in the conversation during their, all the issues that they've been having. Oh, Vancouver has been having so many issues between the Demko injury, the other injured, Brock Besser being injured, and then there's the, days of our lives drama between Elias Pettersson and JT Miller going on. So it seems like there should be a lot of elements working in Nashville's favor for this game that, maybe they can take advantage of some off ice distractions. But you mentioned, we talked about Evangelista will be out, Saros will be in. Little bit to talk about in terms of recent transactions for the Predators. So We did find out earlier this week Kiefer Bellows and Spencer Stastny sent back down to Milwaukee. Stastny, of course, played in a few games and then was healthy scratch for a few before being sent back down. Gravel is called up. Kevin Gravel is called up and to replace him on defense. We don't know exactly what the defensive scheme is going to be. It's kind of been a few moving parts over the last couple games for Nashville. So just with these transactions, obviously the Bellows transaction is kind of a nothing move considering he never even played in a game for the Predators. But I'm curious, a lot of people are asking why, if you're just going to send Stastny down, why would you bring up another defenseman in Gravel? I'm curious. I have some thoughts on that, but Nick, I'm curious
Mhm.
what your impression is of that move.
I don't even know what to make of it, and honestly, probably should have asked Bruno this morning. Now, I think what this indicates to me is they are going to probably have a short leash, or at least a shorter leash now with Justin Barron. And Justin Barron, I think, has been a liability at times, and not that everything's been sunshine and rainbows necessarily, Emma. I think for Justin's sake and after talking to him as well, he knows that defensively, that's not his strong suit currently. And being a defenseman, he's got to have that tightened down. And so I think with Kevin being here, he's just a sound, typical, regular NHL defenseman that you need to have. And I think it's a lot like Vinny Hinostroza being here, where he's a plug and play guy. He can go right in the lineup. It's not anything to worry about. Kevin, I think, does a stout enough job to keep the pucks in front of him and off to the side. He doesn't chase very often either. And I think with Justin, we saw that, and it's evident in his game. And especially when the Sharks were here, oh my gosh. I mean, that first goal against that Juuse Saros just had no chance on with Macklin Celebrini's first ever shot against Nashville that went in was a huge gaffe by Justin Barron. And to his credit, I think he had the right intention with trying to keep the puck in, but he just had no idea that Cody Ceci had a beam line up to the rookie and he just broke down the ice. And I think Justin, he's seen film. He knows he can make these errors and he can correct them. But instead, he's kind of been this consistently inconsistent guy on the back end. And so we know he has the offensive flash, but I think what Nashville needs is stability. And right now, they just don't have that night in and night out with Justin. So that's why Kevin's probably here. And quite frankly, Spencer needs more playing time. He can jump in, play super well. He just needs more playing time. And I think Andrew Brunette made that clear last week, I want to say, is, that's why he's not playing, is he's not played a whole lot of hockey. So they just need him to get more time to get acclimated back. And to his credit, he's done a pretty good job. But that's why you're seeing Kevin Gravel here, and Kiefer Bellows I chatted with him about getting coffee. I was like, if you're a huge coffee guy, here are some spots. And I think that was about all he did here was have a cup of coffee and didn't play a single game. So that's what we've been able to see in the last week or so with all these transactions.
Yeah, it's a little interesting with Bellows. I think that was kind of what set the Luke Evangelista rumors in motion. Oh, is he close to returning? Same with Mark Jankowski, who has been out for a few games, and still no firm update on those guys. But I mean, I think, yeah, with the defense, I think you're exactly right. I think that what you need right now is stability. The Predators' offense is cooking. We know that now. Maybe not so much against Anaheim, but against San Jose, against Minnesota, against, against Vegas even, they're starting to score the goals. And so we're starting to see some good production on that front. But I think when you look at the defense, this is a Nashville Predator. This team, this organization has long prided itself on the defense and the strength of the defense and developing defensemen. And the defense is struggling this year. And I think that, that's for a few reasons. I think that you mentioned Justin Barron. I think there's no reason that he should be playing on the top defensive pairing with Roman Josi, if for no other reason than that they are both rovers. They kind of play all over the place. It's not a great idea to have two of those guys on the same pairing. Plus,
Mm-hmm.
I would say one of them is significantly better at roving than the other. I will let you draw your own conclusions on that. But I think that, with Barron, you're right. You mentioned that first goal, that Celebrini goal from San Jose. There was at least one more, and now I'm blanking on which one it was, but there was at least
Yeah, there
one more
was.
goal that was like directly on him. It was directly his fault. It was a turnover by Justin Barron. Again, he moves around a lot. He gets caught way too low in the zone, and then especially when the opponent is a young and quick team like San Jose, breaks out to score in transition, Barron is, he's not where he needs to be at the right time. And so I agree. I think that Gravel gives you a little bit more stability on the back end. You know exactly what you're going to get from him when he's out there. I think what's also important to point out is that he brings a lot of size and length that uh and that's not to say that size and length are everything, but when you're missing a guy like Jeremy Lauzon, who they are still missing on the back end, they're missing a lot of size back there. And so I think that Gravel can obviously provide that where a Spencer Stastny, for example, cannot. And like you said, I feel like a lot of people were freaking out about Stastny getting sent down already.
Right.
And it's like, okay, we need to remember he wasn't even playing in games until
Mm-hmm.
December 10th with
December
Milwaukee.
10th. Yeah. Yep.
So he is barely, like, let's give the kid a breather. Like, let's just let him, kind of get his feet under him. It's not an indictment of how he has played since he's been up here, but he came up, I think, a lot sooner than what people were expecting after missing training camp, missing the first part of the season. So I think, this is not a doom and gloom situation for Spencer Stastny at all. I think it's about doing right by the player, doing what's best for him. And I highly doubt that this is the last time we'll see him in Nashville this year, regardless of what happens. But that's a lot going on the defense right now. I think even with Brady Shea not quite catching up to speed as quickly as a lot of people would like, but then
Mm-hmm.
you on the opposite side, you've got Nick Blankenberg surprising everyone and being a huge part of this team. So yeah, I think it's a lot going on with the defense right now, which brings me to the main topic of conversation I do want to talk about today, which is goaltending. Um, Obviously, I believe this is still the case. Juuse Saros has the most losses of any goaltender in the NHL right now. Obviously, he got pulled in that first game against San Jose. People were concerned about, oh, he's slipping, he's not doing well. Then he doesn't get the start in the second game against San Jose, which for me, I think that was probably just a pre-planned, pre-scheduled. That was probably always going to be Annanen's start. I don't think it
Yeah, I
was
would say
taken
so.
away. Yeah, I don't think it was taken away from Saros or anything like that. But then, of course, Saros is back in the starter's net against Anaheim. They lose that game 5-2. Nick, how I know how I feel about this, but are you seeing all of I feel like a lot of panic among the fan base about, oh my God, Juuse Saros is terrible now. And the signing him to a long-term extension is a huge mistake because he looks terrible and the world is ending. I mean, are you seeing this? And if so, how much do you think there is actually credence to it? And or do you think that Saros's numbers, which admittedly are not good this year, but then again, look at where the Preds are in the standings. I don't think that, they're entirely unrelated. When you look at his numbers, do you think they're more a reflection of his performance or the performance of the defense in front of him, or both?
I think it's a mix of both, quite frankly. And I think it goes back to the defensemen more oftentimes than not. And that's something that has been hard to drill into people's heads, is that it's a lot more of the defensemen are very inconsistent. And then you also have this conglomeration of both goaltenders trying to be good, and they're having the issue with being consistent. And also, just to fact check that, yes, Juuse Saros and Jordan Binnington lead the NHL with 19 losses this year, and Sam Montembeault is right behind them with 18. So I find that super intriguing. I didn't even think about that, but that is the case. But I think with UC, I don't think there's any buyer's remorse. I think it's a little early for that, quite frankly. But I mean, it is a long-term contract. I didn't think he'd get that long of a deal, just to go back to that conversation. But I know that that's what Barry Trotz wanted. He had that stability in the net. And then also now, like, my immediate question after that contract was signed was, okay, they had Askarov at the time, but now you have nobody down that pipeline whatsoever. Is Magnus Krona one of your goalies of the future? No, there's no way. So for the fans that are jumping to that conclusion, I'd still have some patience for sure. But ultimately, at the end of the day, he's not playing good enough. And, I just wrote this at Lower Broad, and be sure to subscribe because we're diving deep into this stuff. So be sure to go check all this stuff out. But for me, since Annunen has joined the Predators, he has the 11th best save percentage among goalies in all situations, which is impressive for a guy that's backing up Juuse Saros currently. Those are among goalies that have played over 450 minutes too. But in Saros, among that same standard that I just said, he ranks 46th among 52 goalies. I wrote this on Tuesday. So, I mean, for me, looking back at that, it's not going to change too much. And quite frankly, when they play Vancouver, he has to seize this start. He has to really take over and help them win this game because we've not seen that lately. And so if we see the Juuse Saros of old, that's going to be a great sign. And one thing that was brought up to me through someone was that think about to the start of the season too. He did miss one game. Is there some kind of ailment? They're not going to, show too much, quite frankly. And I'm not going to, theorize too much like some people I know, but I don't think he's hurt. I don't think there's that lingering with him currently, Emma, but I just think it's plain and simple. He's not playing good enough hockey, and he knows that. And Justus Annunen has felt confident, and that's what I talked to him about yesterday. Was he has the confidence, he has the charisma, and you want to ride the goalie that does that currently. And also for with where Nashville is, you have to split the starts from now on. You want to make sure that the longevity is there, not just for Saros, but also for Annunen, because you don't know what he can be in the next few years. And quite frankly, he's taking advantage of asking questions, to UC, to Ben Vanderklok, to Mitch Korn. And if he has to ask it and finish to understand more, he's going to do that. That's what he told me. So I think it's more important to them that they can develop somebody because, like I said, they didn't really have anything. So that was a really big deal to get on and in for Wedgwood straight up, going back to that. But also, too, with this fancy goals save above expected, I don't read too significantly much into it, but I think right now it is apparent with UC. I know that is a big minus for him. It depends where you look. It could be Hockey Reference. It could be Money Puck. I like to use Natural Stat Trick. So I think there's different ways that you can look at it. But for UC, I think he knows that he needs to take advantage of, the style of play that he is accustomed to. He comes out of the net more oftentimes than not and plays that front. So I think he has to pick his matchups well. And not only that, Brady Shea has to get used to this coverage still. Nick Blankenberg has played pretty solid, but for the most part, these guys have to play solid in front of them too. And so they get a fresh crack at it against the Canucks, who they've had a hard time playing against the last year or so. So we'll see if they can start to build that up again. And if they can't, then, I mean, it's a whole team effort. But, don't want to put too much blame on UC. He is an all-star goaltender, so we'll see how much he can handle this pressure. And if they have to split the starts up, I wouldn't read too much into it. Like, let's not freak out about this, honestly.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I want to go back to something you said earlier about the, earlier this season, Juuse Saros, obviously he missed that first start. Just talking about early in the season in general, with Saros, this is a guy who typically has very slow starts to his season, and then he kind of hits his stride later in the year. I will say that despite how the Predators overall started their season this year, he did not have a slow start like he usually does. He actually had a very good start, and maybe obviously the team's record does not reflect that. But if you look at those early games for Nashville, even the losses, they weren't getting outscored by a ton. They were all very closely contested games. Saros was keeping them in games when they weren't scoring goals like they were supposed to. That's what he does. So now it's like he's having that slow start, quote unquote. He's just having it in the middle of the season instead of at the beginning. So that's like, just having watched him for a few years now, I'm like, I'm willing to give him the mulligan on that and just say like, hey, he's allowed to have a little bit of, a kind of mid-season slump, if you even want to call it that. But I think that, looking at him and the long-term extension, I think that was the linchpin to this entire thing, the entire plan. You weren't getting Steven Stamkos or Jonathan Marchessault or Brady Shea if you didn't have Saros locked up to that contract, because signing Saros to that contract extension, sends a very clear message that, hey, there's we have a plan and we want to win. We're not rebuilding. We're not starting from scratch. That would be if they had kept Askarov and gone with him, because that would just be like, hey, let's put this kid in there, see what he can do. So now, they have the plan. They've committed to the plan. Let's give him a little bit of grace and let him, have a few off games. I mean, you and I have off days at work too. Like, I just think that it's, this is kind of a flash in the pan struggle for him right now. And as far as the 8-year extension, I mean, that's the price of doing business in the NHL right now. Is like, if you want the guy, you got to give him that kind of term. And looking at what goalies are signing for now, I mean, they've gotten Saros at a pretty significant bargain. So, and you mentioned as far as goalies of the future, I felt that way a little bit when it was, okay, well, now we have Scott Wedgwood as the backup for 2 years, and then you have Magnus Krona and Matt Murray. Like, I don't know, like, we don't really have, I mean, it's, it's like, okay, well, I know we're not getting another Askarov, but still, or I guess Askarov, as he wants to be called now.
The Sharks had to get that correction. Yeah, whatever.
Which he initially corrected us, said it's not Askarov, it's Askarov. So whatever. But new team, new him, new name, whatever. But I think that with that whole situation, like, you would hope for a little bit more, like something, and there was nothing in the pipeline, like you said. Now I think having Annunen should make fans feel better about the future of the goaltending situation. And like you said, and we've said this on the show here a lot, which is that Juuse Saros has always been right up there at the top of the league with Connor Hellebuck for the most used goaltenders, or I would argue overused goaltenders in this league. I mean, there is, especially the way the league is going right now, it's a tandem league. There is no reason that Juuse Saros, or any goaltender for that matter, should be starting 65 plus games in a season. And that's kind of right around where he's been the last few years, even with Kevin Lankinen as his backup. Like, there was no reason that he needed to be starting that many games. Now that you have him signed for 8 years beyond this year, you would want that. I mean, obviously no one's expecting him to be in his prime still 8 years from now, but you still want that contract to age as well as it can. And maybe the way to do that is to not play him as much. Like, don't throw him out there for 65 games when you don't need to. And so I think that extends, the life cycle of the contract. It's better for his long-term health. Plus, I don't know, another element to this whole conversation about Saros versus Annunen, and again, Annunen getting the second start against San Jose, which again, that was predetermined. I don't think that was like, oh, we're going to take this start away from Juuse Saros because we have more faith in Annunen right now. It was nothing like that. But of course, the rumor mill runs wild. And so I think that the what I've seen too, and I'm curious if you've heard about this in the Twitter sewers or anything. And Braden's not here, so he can't tell us to go on Blue Sky. We're Twitter people here, but I
I call it
think
blue
that
ski.
Blue Ski, yeah,
Yeah.
we're Twitter people here, but
Yep.
I think what I've seen on Twitter is people saying, "Oh, well, clearly Andrew Brunette trusts Justus Annunen now more than he trusts Juuse Saros, and
Mm.
so he's giving him more of those opportunities." To which I say, no. I think what it is, again, I think, first of all, I think this is what it looks like to have a solid backup, and a backup that you trust. What you need out of your backup is someone who can come in if and when your starter inevitably has an off night or two. You need a backup who can come in and be solid and be poised and hold down the fort and
Mm-hmm.
take control of the game. And that is what Justus Annunen has done. It doesn't mean that, oh, now there's this controversy and Annunen needs to be the starter now. No, he's doing his job as a backup exceptionally well. And so now, the Predators are in a good situation here with the two of them. And so, I mean, Nick, I know that you talked to Annunen for the story that you mentioned on Lower Broad Hockey. Go subscribe. Wondering if you can give us any more kind of like teasers or anything specific that you talked to him about. I mean, obviously, interesting situation for him. He was coming from Colorado, where he is kind of, he wasn't supposed to be the starter initially, but after the start to Alexander Georgiev's season, Annunen was kind of thrust into this starting role, this pseudo starting role, because Georgiev was struggling so badly. And then, but he's still a young guy, and he wasn't, necessarily, it was maybe a little bit too quick for him to be an NHL starter. Now he's back in the backup role in Nashville in a much more stable situation in net. So wondering, if you got some more insight from him on that, and what he was able to share with you.
Yeah, no, I think what I kind of took away from my conversation with him is he just is a calm guy and he's taking advantage of his opportunities to play. And I think in Colorado, just to give some more context, and I talked to Evan Rao, who covers them full time over there, does a good job. And he really was telling me he just didn't get a fair shakeout toward the end. And so he had a weird start where they relied on him more than they probably should have and called him up and really put him in some weird spots. And he was even supposed to play in a playoff game at one point in his early time in Colorado and got sick and didn't get to play. But I think after just having that conversation and learning more about him, and that was my objective, was to just learn more about the goalie, learn more about his technique and his approach and how things work for him. And so with him, he told me, like any other typical Finnish goalie that I've talked to, is calm is best. And he has a simple approach. It's all about his mindset. It's all about his training. And like I alluded to earlier, and I'm going to go back to it, is he really does love getting to speak Finnish with Jussi. He can ask questions in a much different way than he was able to in Colorado. And then also, he really hasn't been able to do something like that until he was back overseas. And so I think for him to get to do that here, it's awesome. And he knows that, hey, the experience that this Nashville coaching staff has is probably one of the best in the league, if not the best in the league. So I think with him, getting to rely on Ben Vanderklok, I think is a really, really big asset. And every single time I see them out on the ice, it's constant conversation. It's constant evaluation of how to stack himself up and how to approach saves. And so I think for him, he's been calm, and that's been what Andrew Brunette has enjoyed the most about Justus coming in. Is he's calm, he's collective, he doesn't really lose his cool. And I've seen him get competitive at practices where he doesn't like to get beat, and he lets the players know about it. I saw him bump into Roman Josi the other day and was letting him know, like, that's not happening again. So you do have that going for him. He has that competitive nature. So that's going to keep persisting in this organization. Is the goaltenders are going to challenge to be the best. And so I like to see that. If you're a fan, you should like to hear about that too. And so I think it's also been impressive and underrated that Annunen has come in cold a few times, and so has really taken over those games. And back in San Jose, Brunette's, he even referred to that earlier this morning, was we were kind of all over the place. Our focus, we take that for granted, and those goalies can come in and take advantage and say, "Hey, I'm calm. Let's settle this game down now." So that's what he's been able to do, and I even noticed, just to kind of tease the story a little bit, I noticed that Annunen likes a specific desperation save. And so I found that intriguing, to where he likes to read plays, and he likes to read it where if he has to make a move and he knows that they don't need to happen often, because if he's out of position, then it's really going to feel awkward for him, but he's prepared for them. So that's what I enjoyed to hear him say, was he knows that if he has to make a quick move, he's able to do it. And the biggest challenge for him too, quite frankly, has just been that timing. And even though he's really good at it, timing in the NHL is everything. And especially for goaltenders, it's at an all-time high, because he is someone that, yes, is a lot bigger than Juuse Saros. These bigger goalies, they have to be ready for the quick passes. They have to be ready for the quick plays and the regroups and the cycles, because if they're not, the pucks are going to be behind them more oftentimes than not. So he's done a really good job of that. And I think he could really seize this opportunity and give Nashville comfortability with okay, maybe next season you could get probably, 25, 30 starts. I mean, I wouldn't think that's out of the realm of possibility, depending on how UC plays moving forward, Emma.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. I mean, that should be the normal. That should be the new normal. There's no reason to be overtaxing Juuse Saros this much, even if he is playing at the top of his game, which he's not right now. But that to prolong his health and his longevity with the team, I mean, that's what you need to do, and you need a solid backup. I think that's so interesting about the language barrier in Colorado, and then now coming to Nashville. Of course, he has UC, he has Pekka on the staff as well that he can talk to, and it really does make such a difference. I think, being able to learn things and ask questions in your first language. Not that he's not capable of asking them in English, but it's just a little bit different when you get to do it in your native language.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of native language, I want to wrap up today talking about the Four Nations face-off. We are now 2 weeks away from the start of the Four Nations face-off. Again, Sinkers Beverages, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Go check them out and subscribe to Lower Broad Hockey to get all of the latest. But yes, Four Nations. We're going to see quite a few Predators players and former Predators players in this tournament. We talked about, obviously, Juuse Saros and Kevin Lankinen, both going to be protecting the crease for Team Finland. It looks like Juuse is on their, I guess, unofficial depth chart. I think Juuse Saros is goalie number 1 on that roster. And then you've got Lankinen right behind him. And then, of course, former Preds like Mikael Granlund also we'll see on Team Finland. Over for Team Sweden, you've got Philip Forsberg, Gustav Nyquist, and then guys like Matthias Ekholm. And,
Eric Hall is another one too, by the way.
Eric Halla, that's right. And I think that there is, I don't know if you can hear that. My dog had quite a bit to say about that. Big Eric Halla fan, apparently. So I think that looking at these rosters, it's become interesting. There was a situation out of Vegas this week where a certain player has backed out of the tournament, said that he's not going to play due to an ailment, but he is still playing in games with the Vegas Golden Knights. So apparently the ailment is not that bad to keep him out of those games.
Yep.
You and I talked about this this morning, Nick. What's the deal? Like, why is the NHL not penalizing guys for things like this the way that they would with like the All-Star game?
Yeah, it's interesting. I know that previously when guys have pulled out of that, like what you just mentioned, they have to sit out an extra game once the break is over. And so we're not going to see that this time. And maybe it's because they have the 2 weeks off, and maybe it's because guys are going to be repping their countries. And it's quite frankly, it's a more optional thing to do, but you should have a lot of pride playing for your country. And the player that we're talking about is Alex Pietrangelo from the Vegas Golden Knights, former Blues captain. And so I find that intriguing that he pulled out and is still playing NHL games. I know that Jesse Granger over at the Athletic has, highlighted that a little bit, that it's strange that he pulled out. And so there might be more to that, but that's what we know just talking about it on the surface. And so I don't know. I think there might be some more guys that drop. I know that Chris Tanev's name has come across as a possible replacement for Team Canada. I don't think they have decided yet. There's probably a better grasp on it internally. So we'll see what ends up happening. I'm wondering if Bill Guerin has to deal with Team USA, if anybody drops from that as well. So I don't think we'll see any of that, but I am curious, the closer we get, will there be some trades beforehand or right after because of the guys playing in the Four Nations? I mean, one player to look at for the Predators especially is Gus Nyquist. Could he get traded before or maybe after? But if he gets traded before, would he still want to play? I find that really intriguing. Could we see a headline like that pop up with another player or with Gus? I don't know. Mikhail Granlund could be another guy to watch out for as well. Not reporting anything, but, I think it's interesting to think about things that way, because when guys, go play, and these are all not too far away. It's in Montreal and Boston. So, I mean, they're not going too far, but there's a lot going on. So we'll see as well. And one honorable mention, Kevin Morley from the Preds. He's an athletic trainer. He's going to be with Team USA, by the way. So just wanted to give credit where that's due, because there's another member of the Predators that's going to be part of something big. So pretty cool to see something like that. But yeah, Forsberg, Saros, and Nyquist are your Preds reps for Four Nations. And honestly, I'm pretty excited to watch it because I have really missed international play. I don't know about you, but I would like to play for my country. So I don't want to see too many other guys end up saying, nah, I'm okay.
Well, it's interesting too with Pietrangelo for Team Canada. I mean, really for every country, but I feel like especially for Canada, obviously the depth of talent they have there. There's been so much. I feel like almost as big, if not bigger, than the news of who made the rosters was who didn't make the rosters. And it's like they're, different. I write over at the Hockey News, and they're coming out with lists of like the all snub team for Canada at the Four Nations face-off. So it's like, and there was multiple snub teams, like several layers deep. So I think that, clearly the competition was tight for US and for Canada in particular. But I think that it's an interesting choice. You don't want to, I try not to pass too much judgment about things like, what could be going on. But again, if you're still playing in NHL games, but you're not gonna, and you've already announced that you're pulling out of Four Nations, it's interesting. It's hard for me not to pass a little bit of judgment on that one.
Because it's like, if you're going to play, commit to it. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason other than getting to play for your country. And I think also, too, this will open the eyes of the IIHF, quite frankly, because they need to see more games come up. And I think it's weird to see just 4 countries. I know that some people have had that, internal thought and debate of, why isn't Russia doing this, or why isn't Switzerland doing this, or some other countries? And it's like, well, they're not being too picky, but I think these are the 4 most reliable countries to have for a tournament. So, I think that's an interesting aspect as well. And I think this tournament could also open up ideas to do other things like this. So we'll have to see if this is a big hit or if it's kind of a flub. But it's not like you're playing for a gold medal. I think the World Junior Championships could be a little bit more entertaining than this, quite frankly, but we'll find out. I don't know, but Emma, I am excited to see, like I said, international play, because we've not really had that over the last couple of seasons. And so it should be really fun to see how guys approach it as well. Is it going to be more aggressive? Is it going to be kind of standoffish? Because at the Olympics, especially the year that Crosby scored his golden goal, I thought that was a more physical tournament. And so could we see some guys play it safe, or could we see some guys just kind of go all out here? That's always an aspect that I'm intrigued with, because if they're going all out and these guys are under contracts and they're playing in the NHL, some in playoff spots, it's like, how do I approach this game tonight? Like, what am I going to play for here? So I don't know. Like I said, it's all about playing for your country and how seriously you take it. So I don't know. I know that Juuse Saros would probably take this really seriously, though.
Oh, yeah. I think that, one thing, like you said, it's not the Olympics, more of a precursor to the Olympics, but still, I think better than the traditional all-star games situation, because again, even with all-stars, it's like they're not really playing for anything. This, at least, these guys are playing for something bigger than themselves. They're playing for their countries. And while, yes, it's not, on necessarily the world stage in the same way that the Olympics or, a World Cup type tournament would be, it's still just the like I said, the implication that they're playing for something bigger than themselves. I know, having covered multiple all-star games in the NHL, it is that entire event. I'm so glad they're taking a break from it this year. It is just like devoid of any passion on the part of the players, on the part of anyone else, like any of the staff who's there. The broadcast, those of us who have to be there covering it when the rest of the league is on vacation. It's just like, and the players don't really even want to, I don't want to say they don't want to be there, but I mean, some of them really don't. And I think that it was funny, actually. I'm glad you brought up Juuse Saros and how he will take this seriously, because when I went with UC to All-Star Week in South Florida 2 seasons ago, and they did the weird kind of tournament where it's like it was like Central versus Pacific versus Atlantic.
Yeah, it was really
versus
strange.
Metro.
Metropolitan,
it was a weird, and then it was kind of like a knockout round. And so it's like whoever loses the first 2, or whoever wins the first 2 games, they go on and play the second game to play for, I guess, the championship. And
right, yeah.
I was sitting there with a couple other Pred staff members at the time, and we were sitting there rooting against the Central Division because we wanted our day to be over. We're like, okay,
I agree.
We don't want them to win. We don't want them to win, because we if they win, then we got to stay here for an extra game. If they lose, then we get to go home. Right. And I remember I was in the locker room with UC right before the game. I was like, hey man, feel free to like sit back a little bit on this one. Like we're all not trying to stay here all day. And he looked at me, he's like, why would I do that? He's like, no, like I'm going to play, like I'm going to play my ass off. I'm like, all right, well, I guess that's why we love you. And that's why we have you. And we like that attitude, any game that's not the all-star game. But yeah, I imagine that playing for his country, he's going to have even more of that feeling and this desire to, to prove himself, or not prove himself, but, do his
resume.
Best. Yeah. And I think that, obviously he's a guy that doesn't really have much playoff experience. That's not necessarily his fault, but any of those things when it comes to conversations about his credentials, and I mean, less of an issue now that he's not up for a new contract, but I think that's a knock that was often taken against him, is the lack of playoff experience. So I'm sure that getting a deep run in a tournament like this one could go a long way towards, like you said, beefing up his resume, which I think, I'm sure he would want to do.
Yeah, for sure.
Real quick, you mentioned it's an interesting situation. That same year that I was in Florida with Juice, that was the same year that Bo Horvat got traded, like right before the All-Star game. And so we got there, and like he was still there, but he was playing for, it's like he was representing
for Vancouver.
Yeah, but like it was but everything next to his name had Islanders. Like it was a very weird situation.
I think he ended up wearing an Islanders jersey, right? At some point, I think in the actual game he did.
Yeah, he did. And so it was a very like I don't know, very bizarre situation. But, it's a good
Mm-hmm.
point that you bring up about um, Gus Nyquist as a guy who could, potentially be traded. Again, not reporting anything. We've
Yeah.
heard his name, and honestly, it just makes sense because he is kind of a textbook short-term rental candidate for a
Mm-hmm.
contender. He's got experience in the playoffs. He's a great depth scorer. He can play on the penalty kill. He can play on the power play, and he's on an expiring contract. So
Mm-hmm.
why wouldn't you want to add him to your team if you're trying to make a deep run in the playoffs?
Yeah.
So
He's done it twice. So
yeah, so looking at a guy like him, or like you said, Granlund, but I want to focus on the Predators for this. I think, you know, I believe it was last week, Barry Trotz was talking to Jared Stillman on 1025 and talked about how, hey, at the deadline, if we are in some kind of situation that's even remotely similar to where we were last year, where we think that we're just like one or two pieces away, then we could be buyers. Um, just kind of want to get your overall thoughts on that, and whether you think that that's, what do you think that means, whether you think that's a good strategy, and even if the Predators are quote unquote buyers, do you still see them kind of parting with a guy like Nyquist at the deadline?
yeah, I still see them moving off of a guy like Gus, quite frankly. I find it super interesting that Barry said that. And I think he has said it basically twice, but he affirmed it last night with Jared. And so I thought that was intriguing, just in the possibility of, hey, we might give up a deeper draft pick to get somebody to help us out for now. And it's like, but you have also talked about bringing up the kids that like, bring them up, like the Svechkovs and the Delgaizos and, a couple other guys as well that we've already seen this year. Zach LaRue's been here the entire season, basically. But look, I don't see there being any interest in like an Andre Kuzmenko as like a random guy, because I know someone I know really loves him. And then you've also got like some other RFAs too. Like, are the Preds really going to want to take a big gander at, okay, can we give up something and maybe keep this guy if we re-sign him? And Barry's been on record saying too, Emma, I think it's worth bringing up on that regard of he wants someone with a little bit of term. So is he looking at guys that have 2 to 3 year contracts? Because that is something that intrigues me, because it's, okay, who are you trying to flip? Because if you're going to flip somebody and get someone younger and that is already established, there's been very few names. It's been slim. I would say slim pickings because of who's been out there and not doing well. Like Dylan Cousins is one name that's been floated around a lot. And I don't know if he's going to end up here or not, but that could be one guy to keep an eye on for sure. Are the Flames going to want to move some younger guys? I don't know. Like, I've thought about them a little bit too, but like the Rangers have turned things back on. What are they going to do? We know that the team that the Preds are playing on Wednesday in Vancouver, they might want to move off on some guys too. So I think it's interesting also too in the Central, and this just broke. Elliot just tweeted this, that the Blues and Brandon Saad are mutually agreeing to terminate his contract, making him a free agent. So are we going to see more things like that unfold too, where there's older guys that might just want to move on and do something different? That's interesting. We don't see that happen very much. But yeah, Barry talking about doing that and weaponizing draft picks is interesting. Remember too, he has 3 first-round picks this year. I'm very curious, is he going to deploy and use any of those this year? Because he could have something up his sleeve with that for sure. That's just how I'm feeling a few weeks removed from all of this, because not counting the 4 nations, Emma, we're getting really close to the trade deadline.
Yeah, we are. And, it's interesting you bring up those first round picks. Barry has said previously that he does not plan on weaponizing those. He doesn't plan on parting with those, and that he wants to keep them. And I think, you have to wonder too, like, based on where the Predators are in the standings right now, where could they finish? Where are they going to be picking in the first round? They may really want to hang on to those picks, because one of them might, be pretty high, higher than they're used to, depending on how the rest of the season goes here. So I think that it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Like you said, we are really not that far. Like NHL games wise, there is not much time left between now and the trade deadline, which is crazy to believe. But I think, I personally, I love Gus Nyquist, but I think that it makes sense if anyone comes to you with an offer for him. I think you pulled the trigger, because I think that, he's on an expiring contract, going to be 35 years old. Regardless, even if you brought him back, I'm not saying that this is even necessarily an option, but even if you brought him back on like a 1-year deal next year, he's not part of your long-term future for this team. It doesn't make sense. And so when you're Barry Trotz and you're trying to create that space and trying to, make opportunities for forwards who you have in your system, then why, or not even necessarily guys who are in Milwaukee, but guys who are in Nashville right now who could, be primed for a more elevated role, like a Luke Evangelista or a Zach LaRue or someone like that. So I think that, bringing Nyquist back after this year doesn't make any sense to me. But then if you have him for the rest of this year, at this point, you're not a playoff team. So why do you keep him? If you can get anything in return, I don't even know what the return would necessarily look like, considering, again, his age and the fact that he's on an expiring contract. But I mean, I don't know. I think that no matter what the return is, I think it's at least you get something.
Yeah, I'd say you get maybe a fourth or a fifth, sixth at the worst. Because look at what the Preds did last year. They got Beauvillier and they got Jason Zucker. Like, you didn't give up much for that at all. So, yeah. I mean, it's going to be something like that. And Gus is not replicating the type of year that he had last year. So it's not going to be much at all, Emma.
Yeah. So still interesting to see, that I don't know that, just given the state of the Predators payroll right now and all the contracts, all the trade protection on all those contracts, they really can't go full blown sell mode, even if they wanted to, but I don't think they want to. And so, you got to look at those pieces that are technically movable, guys like Nyquist that, could potentially be trade deadline bait for other teams, especially contenders. So something to keep an eye on for sure. I'm going to call it. I'm going to say that we have really covered all the bases today, I think. And Nick, I want to thank you again for joining here in a pinch. And sorry, everyone had to listen to my voice, my sick voice. I'm still getting over a cold, so I apologize if I sound a little nasal today. But I want to thank you for joining, and you all will get a rest from my voice next week. Braden will be back, and he'll be chatting up a storm, and I will be speaking only when spoken to, which is probably how it should be. But thank you again, Nick, for joining. Again, go read his latest story, subscribe to Lower Broad Hockey, read his latest story about Justus Annunen. It's really insightful. Definitely go subscribe for more things like that. We're doing some really good stuff here at Lower Broad. But Nick, in the meantime, when you're not at Lower Broad Hockey, where can the good people find you on social media and the rest of your work?
Yeah, if I'm not at the rink, it's at Kieser Nick on X, I guess formerly known as Twitter. Probably the best place to find me. And I think I'm Nick_Kieser29 on Insta, if you really care to follow me there, I guess. I post some of my stories there on my story. So, but yeah, stay tuned that way. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. So.
Awesome. Well, again, definitely subscribe to get some more great content from Nick and from Braden Gall, Adam Vingan, from myself. I have the NHL newsletter out every Friday over at Lower Broad Hockey, but you can also catch me on X, Twitter, whatever it's called, the bad place, at Emma_Lingan. I technically have a Blue Sky account. I think it's just my name. You can't use underscores there, so that kind of bothers me. But then you can also find me on Instagram, same handle, Emma_Lingan. Again, you can get my newsletter every Friday at Lower Broad Hockey. You can also find more of my Preds coverage at the Hockey News. But for now, that is going to do it for this week on the Gold Standard. Thank you again, Nick. Thank you to Shotgun Willie's Barbecue and Sinker's Beverages for keeping us free for you all every single week. We will be back with an all new episode next week. We'll see you then.